Hey Jess, how you doing?
I'm good. It's really nice to meet you. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me about sports psychology. I reached out to a lot of different athletic directors in our area, and your athletic director got back to me and said that you might be interested in starting some sports psychology services or mental training for your athletes in the upcoming season. So I just, wanted to reach out and, get that conversation started with you. I didn't know if you had some ideas of where you wanted to start, or if you had any thoughts on what you wanted for me to help you with for next year.
Yeah, we just are trying to start very simple stuff with the kids. Just um, trying to get them to understand a little bit more than I think. The regular types of things like coaches have a lot of goal setting stuff, but we want to try to go a little bit further into that and get them to understand a little bit more. Maybe you know, as far as an individual athlete and as part of the team.
Is there anything that you feel has that you've worked with the team on before, or maybe some of your other coaches?
We've worked, we've always talked about, like I said, goal setting. I mean, that's a big one. Is at least getting the kids to try to understand, what they want to accomplish, and then trying to work from there to see, to see if, that's what they really want to accomplish. But even that, especially for the younger kids on the team, is really tough because they're not sure of what goals they should have.
Mm,
So it's always something that by the time a student is a junior or a senior, then they realize, hey, 2 years ago, when we talked about goal setting, I shouldn't have said that. I just wanted to make sure I was, I placed at a meet, or like I got second or third place at this meet when I was a freshman, when I probably could have gotten first, but
mm,
I didn't push myself to do those things but they didn't really have an idea of what the goal was. So for track and field, that's one of the biggest things for us all the time, is just trying to get kids to understand, um, what they're actually capable of doing, sooner than later.
hmm
And I don't know, I mean, the one thing that I know kids say to me a lot is, as they get older, is I wish I would have been able to see this happening sooner, because it would have made a big difference. And you can tell them as much as you can tell them because you see it as an adult and a coach, but then they're still not really, uh, not that they're not accepting of you saying it, but they're not actually necessarily believing it themselves, or believing in themselves to think that they have that capability.
hmm
So sort of like, with goal setting, trying to make their trying to actually have them be that confident in themselves to have real goals and believe that they can get to those goals.
hmm hmm Okay. So have you, because it sounds like you're like on an individual basis, like working with athletes and your team. You've worked with a lot of goal setting, but has there ever been like a group like session on this, or has this been kind of on an individual basis? Because it sounds like you have a lot of experience doing that with individual kids. Have you ever worked with the whole team on it?
I think as far as like the whole team goes, I think that's we've we've tried to at least get the whole team to understand, like, what our overall process of being a track team is. And obviously we talk. I think the biggest thing we do is we just talk a
Mm,
lot about stuff, and trying to give examples. And um, but as far as like working on goal setting with the whole entire group, sometimes that's tough, depending, I mean, when depending on how many kids you have on your team, and there's sometime, some years we've had, 90 kids on the team versus, 40 kids on the team, but it's just been tough because in the springtime it's hard to really, in my mind, it's tough sometimes to take time to do other things because of weather and so many other uh you know schedule things that affect you, that you just want to try to get through your practices. So that's something where maybe I need to be a little more accommodating of, to be able to take that time. But I mean, we try to have like team meetings and go over results and go over meets and sort of prep to see, hey, we did this last meet, we were going to try to do this next meet. But again, as far as like trying to do everything together as a whole, and adding in maybe um, some activities for the team to do, that's maybe where we need to do a little bit more.
Okay. And that's something that I I think that I can help build on with you and with the team, that we can look at it as from a systematic approach. Like we can talk about some of that preseason, or even in the winter season time. And I'm taking notes as we're talking, because what I like to do after we meet is just kind of type up a little sheet just about some of the things that we both talked about. So we're both
Okay.
on the same page. And just making sure that I don't miss out on anything. But I think that with the goal setting specifically, we can look at that from a team, because you're right, with track, there's the team dynamic and the individual competition. And within that, for sports psychology in general, is just trying to help athletes being able to perform optimally. We want them to perform at their best. We want them to be able to, the things that they're working on so hard in practice, we want them to be able to then do that in competition. And so, or better, our hope is better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but especially with goal setting, that's huge. And you're right with track, or with your younger track athletes, that if they haven't done this before, even are trying new events, or aren't really sure what, what a 5-minute mile looks like or feels like, and they don't
Yeah.
know that that's their goal. So that's certainly something that I feel that we can work together on. Um, and as far as time goes, like in the winter season or in preseason, do you have any kind of idea of what sort of timeline we could work in? Like, could I come out maybe, just practices at first, just to observe, and then
Hmm.
being able to, work with the team? I'd like to do that with teams just so that they get to know me a little bit, and they before I start telling them, okay, guys, here's what you need to do. And so
Yeah.
I really want them to see that I'm interested in not only the sport, but them, the team, and part of your process. Every team is so different.
Hmm.
But just being able to kind of see, where we can fit that time into that works for you. um
Yeah, we have practice in the winter. We usually do 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Like
okay.
that'll start, um, even though that's our preseason, that'll start pretty much in like November, right before Thanksgiving, and then we'll run all the way through, depending on how a lot of kids, because it's not a mandatory thing, or it's not an actual varsity sport at our school. Kids basically are just coming to work out. And then we do have some kids who are involved in actually going to meets in the winter time. And they obviously have a different set of goals because they're trying to compete. So we have basically a full range of kids, from kids who are literally just trying to figure out what track and field is, to kids who already have done preseason stuff but don't go to meets, to kids who are doing preseason things and going to meets and are competing at a pretty high level at those indoor meets.
Hmm.
Those run all the way actually through the first or second week of the spring season. So we'll actually have some kids who go and compete in like the indoor state meet and the national meet, but those are actually in the last weekend of February and then like the first or second weekend in March. So we'll actually sometimes, most times, we start outdoor season while other kids from indoor are still competing.
Okay.
So then we have that crossover with those kids. But yeah, usually 3 days a week. And then for spring season, we're practicing uh, before meet starts. We are practicing usually Monday through Saturday. Saturdays, it might not be every Saturday, but usually Saturdays, we'll try to get at least one group of kids to come in, whether there's, sprinters, jumpers, whatever it may be, just to try to get them a little extra work without everybody there. Or sometimes we open it up just as a voluntary thing on Saturday and whoever comes. But then, the meet schedule starts basically right at the end of March, with our divisional meets on like a Tuesday, and then everything. All of our invitationals are usually Fridays and Saturdays. So
Okay.
once we get into that, then we're pretty much just trying to prep for meets as much as possible and do that.
Okay. And so, and because you have athletes working at all different levels, some, like you had said, some are competing very high level, some are just kind of getting into the sport. Are there any, do you see any other kind of components that you think would really benefit your team kind of right now where they are with not really having much of an introduction to sports psychology, but and some ideas I had were like tension management, like going into competition, imagery, visualization, positive self-talk. Do you think that that would be beneficial for your team at this point?
Definitely, I think talking about the winter season and having it and having it that kids don't necessarily have to compete. I mean, as a head coach, I'm always trying to get as many kids to go to indoor meets as I can. That way they realize what competition is like. It's not going to be obviously the same as what it is outdoor, but it's still going to be running, jumping, throwing. And It's really, really difficult to get kids to even try it because
Mm.
they're that nervous about it, because
Um,
they're not sure. Um,
Nervous about like competing or nervous about like
yeah.
the sport?
I mean, I would say they're probably. I mean, even if they're an inexperienced kid, I would say that the nervousness is coming from competing
Okay.
more than just being new to the sport.
Okay.
So that's one thing too. We've always tried to get as many kids to get to, even if it's just two or three indoor meets. And the indoor meets, some of them are pretty small, so it's not, and you don't have the same kids at the indoor meets because you have a lot of other kids playing basketball and doing wrestling. So you don't see the same kids that you'll see in the spring.
Okay.
So it really is a good opportunity to get kids to compete, just to understand exactly what it is and see what it's like to be at a track meet all day. But it's really, really difficult to get kids to do that. They're not, they're not sure of themselves, and they don't want, they just are like, well, I'm not ready to do this, or I'm nervous about doing it, even though the expectation is not to necessarily, um, you know, set the best mark. It's basically just to go and
Right.
and experience it first. That's the whole thing, just the baby step of going. So, and then we do have, the other thing would be for some kids who we see the potential of them, they've been on the team, we see the potential of them doing well, but they need more experience at meets. They don't want to go to indoor meets either, or like the winter meets, because they don't think it's going to benefit them. So, being able to work with those kids to get them to understand that having more repetition in
Mm.
a setting that's competitive is going to help them when it does come time to be able to do your best outdoors. I mean, indoor, when you get to the indoor state meet, that's obviously um, a pretty competitive meet, and obviously, a national meet. competing with kids across the country, obviously competitive. However, mostly everything else indoors is just going, and you'll see other schools that, bring three, four, or, a whole team, but you're not going to see the same level of quality at
Okay.
those kids. So, but getting the older kids to understand that, like, being in a competitive setting, and even if there's only two or three kids in that meet that, um, let's say, are seated very well, and it looks like could be competitive with them, they still are. They're not super excited about going, but they're not understanding it. It's going to help them in May when we go to our outdoor, county championship and district championship and state championship. Essentially, that's the stuff in May that we are looking to really excel at.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, so we have it. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's so many a different array of everything. With kids not wanting, kids being fearful of it, or kids not, kids who we know should be going because they need to get that competition and the reps against competition, but just don't want to. So, but yeah, and I mean, the other thing would be too, I think the one thing about that track and field, I think, is that when you're talking about a huge big team, it takes a lot of good kids that have good leadership to control the team, and encourage them and get them to do those things. And that's something I think that, we have a lot of good kids on the team who are are very good leaders. But then it's all the fallback of every kid who's a good leader, when you talk to them individually and say, hey man, we just need you to do more. We need you to do more with, like, talking to some teammates and getting them on the same page, and encouraging them to be a bigger part. The big thing that we get from the leadership aspect is, well, I lead with my actions. I don't lead,
Mm,
and it's like, so to put action is fine. However, they could be even more impactful if they would use their voice.
okay.
So that's another big part of what we do, because we always pick captains, and we try to have captains in all areas of our event areas, because that way we have people who are looking after everybody, but they sort of just want to be a captain and be able to show with their competition, and not really do a lot of um, you know do a lot of conversing with their leadership role.
So would that be an area like that leadership with your captains? Would that be an area that you think I would be able to work with some of those
Oh,
kids?
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, those kids are, usually kids who are willing to try anything, and, but for some reason they just are not, they don't want to be all the time involved in being in the big group. And it's,
Yeah.
we have limited time with the big group, and as a coaching staff, when we're talking to everybody and addressing the team during stuff, we always ask the captains to say anything, and you'll get a couple remarks here and there, but they're not very impactful, I don't think.
Okay. Okay. So what they kind of helping that direct them or guide them, to
Yeah,
maybe the really good attributes that you see that they could be providing, and just trying to see if we can kind of in a
yeah,
way help them to see their potential as
yeah,
leaders, not
for
only with
sure.
actions but with the team. Well, that sounds good. So what my thoughts are, and one thing I want you to know, like for how I like to work with kids, especially at the high school level, is I try to make sports psychology very user friendly. I a lot of times students, especially at that age, if they haven't really been exposed to it, or they have an idea. I mean, I even myself, I know when I was younger, I thought anybody who did mental training, I thought you were like sitting under a tree and doing meditation and, and yoga.
Yeah.
And now that I've learned so much more about it, and just how impactful it can be for athletes, not only in sport, but other areas, I really want to make it user friendly and for them to see, um, especially with the track team, the diversity of your athletes. You have your distance runners who are one kind of mindset, and then your throwers who are a different mindset. There's such a diverse group, but being able to provide them a service and some ideas and strategies that can be used by everyone, or that they can pick and choose certain things. Like I like to try to, like I'm thinking with was coming onto the team during the off season and for practices just to observe and be around and for them to get to know me. That way,
Yeah.
when we do have our big group team meetings, and I really like to focus on the educational and applied side of sports psychology so that they can see, I can run them through a breathing exercise. I can run them through a visualization exercise, and they can see, hey, maybe that doesn't work for me. But, when she helped me with the breathing part, that did help. I did notice a difference. And
Okay.
that way, allowing them to kind of focus on what's going to work for them with the understanding that it's not gonna happen the first time. It's like any habit, it's like any sort of skill or technique that you're practicing, it's gonna take a little bit of time. But what I try to do, especially when they're first just starting to get to know me and maybe dive a little bit more into some mental training than what they've done before, is, then, okay, when mom and dad are pick you up today, I want you to try to visualize for 2 more minutes on the ride home. Or I want you to, when you're getting your clothes out for the next day tonight, or when you're brushing your teeth, go through the imagery that we worked on today. So that way they can kind of see that it can be user friendly, because kids don't have time to do, even a half hour extra with their very busy time, especially during the season. So I like to give them little things and little practices that they can do in the off season so they can see how easily it can be incorporated into the season when things get harder, when it gets into that, later season, later competition,
Yeah.
and the postseason, because I'm hoping that the practices that they've been working on preseason, during season, and postseason are really going to be strong, and it won't be like we're introducing something new the week before states. So it really, I look at it as a progression, but also something that's very user friendly for them, and understanding that they're also different, that there may be things that don't work for them, and then we start to see what does work for each individual, for the groups, but then also the individuals. And within that, especially with some of the things you're talking about with leadership, um, and some of your athletes, depending on what level they're at, I would really like to meet with some of them individually, as they would want. I don't want this
Yeah.
to be anyone to feel that they have to do this. It's not, I'm hoping you're on the same page that we're not requiring anybody to,
Oh, yeah,
um,
totally. Totally.
yeah, to do some of these things because they may not feel comfortable. But if they do feel comfortable, I'm very open to working with the kids individually. The one thing with that, and I just always like to let coaches know up front, confidentiality is also a big issue.
Okay.
With and 90% of the time, especially when we're working through sports things, they want their coaches to know. And I always
Got
want
it.
to make sure that they know, hey, if you want me to tell coach, we can talk about this, or if there's something that they'd prefer not to, I always let them know that, as well as anything when it is in regards to harm. Sometimes with high schools, especially, students are all going through different things that, I'm always concerned for their safety first. Um, and
Gotcha.
and I know that might be kind of strange to be bringing up right now, but I always start off, letting athletes know that, me being concerned for their safety, and then also kind of that if their safety is ever in question, that's when I do have to break confidentiality and tell parents, and
Yeah. No, that's understandable.
Yeah, yeah. So I always like people to know that up front. And but those individual meetings, that's where, sometimes those things do come out. And that's where, certainly I hope that once they would see me as more part of the structure and part of the team and feel more comfortable with me, that they can feel more open, that we can talk about those things. And which is helpful, for the whole process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm. Um, and then I just wanted to see if there was anything else that, like, you think I don't wanna say, like, as a problem on the team, but something that you're like, "Man, if we could get a fix to this, among the team," or something that maybe you see, because you obviously wanted to bring in, mental training for next season. Is there something in
Mhm.
particular that you felt, strongly, or kinda prompted you for this year wanting to make that a goal?
Um, I think the one thing that like I notice a lot with kids is that it really doesn't matter what level they are. There's still so many kids that are looking at the competition and are focused on what the competition is doing, and they're always like, oh well, this person's already run faster than that or jumped this, and and
Mm,
I can't do that. I don't, I'm not going to be able to do that. Or they run a race and they're like, hey, see, I'm not fast, and they could be a sophomore that's just uh, developing into something, but it's like like there's overwhelming majority of kids. It's they need it now,
yeah,
and unfortunately, track and field is something that some kids obviously do have it right away, and obviously they probably have worked hard to they might have more experience as a younger athlete, or they might be just a overall better experienced athlete than some. But there's just so many kids across any range of capabilities that are just like, yeah, see, like I couldn't do this, I can't do this, I can't run this fast, like you want me to do what, and they're just it's obviously like confidence, but like just how they're speaking about it and thinking about it, like in such a negative manner all the time.
and that's a great point for self-talk, and there's exercises behind that we can run them through, because I really, hear what you're saying, that as soon as that, I'm sure, like, when you guys tell them that, like you said, this is where, you want me to do what, and trying to get them to understand that you have a faith, or a trust in them to do something. But then if they
Hmm.
don't see it or they don't feel it, it's
Yeah,
going to be on different levels. And we want to try to merge that, you're the what your coach thinks and what you think. No, like, your coach believes in you, but if they don't believe in themselves, they're not going to see
yeah,
your vision.
yeah.
um,
When our coaches ask kids to maybe step out of their comfort zone and do a different event that they might not have a lot of experience in, or if we have a circumstance where we don't have enough kids, or we have an injury or something, and we're trying to get a kid who still has an event or two available into a different area to help, like a relay or something. That's like one of the hardest things to do, because nobody ever wants to step into those roles. I shouldn't say ever. There are kids who some kids actually do, I think, strive to be, I'll help the other guys or the other girls, but many more kids are like, I don't want to do that at all.
right.
And but they have the capability. And the other thing that kids don't understand is that even through meets, like, we're still training. So doing the other events or different events is also part of physical training. And also it is sort of, I try to let them know, hey, this is something that is going to be tough, but if you can get through it, you'll realize that it's not as bad as you think. And
Right.
obviously that's not anything crazy sports psychology, but it's like the note of being mentally, just being open-minded a little bit more, and it will make you a little, mentally tougher, because you'll be able to say that, yeah, I did it and it was okay.
Right, and I definitely agree with you, and I think that that's a place, where, working on some perseverance and grit, or mental strength. That is where we can add and incorporate some techniques, because as they start to talk to themselves differently through having a self-talk, trying to change some of those thoughts, they can then be able to proceed with some of those harder topics of being able to have more grit, and it definitely flows into each other, because the minute that they start to realize that, hey, when I talk to myself in a more positive manner, I feel a different way. They start to think a different way, and then they're going to be able to ultimately perform a different way. That's going to lead into, some of those harder things that we want, our athletes and kids to be able to learn and be educated on, so that way they can step up when it really is important and when it really matters, because times are going to come up that they're not, that nobody was planning on, the anchor to get hurt in the right before the relay. And so somebody does have to step
Yeah.
in there, even if mentally they haven't put themselves in that position. Even weather, I think about weather with track, how
Yeah.
that's part because track hardly ever cancels due to weather, and just mentally preparing and having themselves ready for weather, and what the differences are going to be in that competition setting are really important. So but I really think, just overall there's some ideas here that you've given me of ways that I feel that we can work together, and that I can help your team, with some other ideas for sports psychology and mental training. Was there anything else that you wanted to go over today, or do you think this is kind of a good start? And well, that is one thing I do want to let you know. I want to keep revisiting this. I want our
Okay.
dialogue and our
Yeah.
working relationship to be open. That if you're, first week, hey, I don't think that worked, or I had another idea there, please, the more open we can communicate with each other, it's going to be better for the kids. Um,
Okay.
but
Yeah, that's awesome.
is there anything now though that you think we missed or something
Um,
to talk
I'm
about?
thinking about the other thing that like I really feel is tough sometimes for kids is to understand um, when a coach is sort of trying to push them and be hard on them, but they always kids a lot of times see it as, well, the coach doesn't like me or they're being mean to me.
Mhm. Okay.
And having that understanding that, like, if you really, I mean, again, that to me sort of goes back to goals, and a lot of these again because a lot of these kids don't understand what their goals really are. They don't
Mm,
know, and I mean, having not, again, I'm never going to call myself an expert, but just having being able to see kids every day, not only in teaching but in coaching, and understand, and see some of their capabilities. I sort of feel like as a coaching staff, um, we can put kids in situations where they can be successful, but it's going to take, it's going to take just a little bit of work, and then when we're sort of trying to encourage and push at the same time, then it turns into, oh, this coach is angry, this coach doesn't
mhm.
like me, even though realistically it's just because we could get you there a little bit quicker if you would be willing to do a little bit more.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so I think kind of going back to that self-talk, like you said, the goal setting, because then I think if you guys are on the same page with goal setting, and the plan behind that too, with goal setting, if everybody has the same plan or idea of what that plan looks like, that
Yeah.
might be another place where, kind of to merge the two and get you guys on the same page of knowing, well, your coach, those, you both agreed that by next Friday you'd be able to do this many reps or something. I'm totally just, throwing something out, but
Yeah.
and then they're not there, and being like, okay, well, what happened within there, and how can we change that plan, or how can we adapt it? Or is it that they just, gave up, and how do we help them work through that and be um strong in knowing that their abilities are good, and everything that you think that they are, that they're more positive than what they're maybe talking to themselves internally about. So absolutely, I think that that would be, something that we can educate the athletes and staff, your other coaches on, and that way they can kind of see it more as a team approach and not just something of, okay, the coach is telling you to go do this, and
Yeah,
then that can be worked together on. Wonderful. Okay.
that'd be awesome.
Great. Great. Well, I will, like I said, I'm going to type up just some of the things we discussed, and I'll send that to you. And if there's anything you thought we missed, we certainly can have another meeting, or I'll give you a sharing capability on that doc, so that way you can add that in, and then we can kind of start a plan from there.
Okay,
All
that's
right.
awesome.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It was nice working with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Forward to it.
All righty, see ya.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.